Chapter 326. At the same time, Qin Xiao's favorable impression of the North vanquishing prince's estate had also fallen to the lowest point. Gu Xingyin didn't know that she could actually receive such additional benefits when she went out once. Since the day she met Zhang Mingxiu, Gu Xingyin slowly came into contact with Zhang Mingxiu more and more. Zhang Mingxiu also gradually began to talk about everything with her. Judging from elder sister Meng's age, the noble ladies in the capital should already be engaged at this age. I wonder if elder sister Meng is engaged? Zhang Mingxiu asked. Gu Xingyin blushed and lowered her head without saying a word. Zhang Mingxiu had an idea in her heart. She recalled that although she and her cousin were in love with each other, they couldn't be together forever. She faintly said, I wonder which family's young master is so blessed. Gu Xingyin still had a shy expression. I haven't met him yet, but his reputation is extremely good. Little did she know that her shy and expectant look had touched Zhang Mingxiu's sore spot. She was afraid that she would never have the chance to become a bride in this lifetime. The Grand Tutor's estate was so sinister. If the young miss of the Liang estate was spoiled and unruly, how could she be allowed to marry into the family? Seeing her suddenly shedding tears, Gu Xingyin seemed to be extremely surprised and hurriedly asked what happened. Zhang Mingxiu wiped her tears with a handkerchief, and a sudden desire to pour out her heart surged in her heart. She slowly began to tell her story. The more Gu Xingyin listened, the more she couldn't help sneering in her heart. In Zhang Mingxiu's narration, she and her cousin were in love with each other, and should be a match made in heaven. However, her cousin's fiancé came out of nowhere, and used her family's background to forcefully ask the emperor to grant the marriage. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, she had no choice but to leave her cousin and live in this place alone. If an unreasonable person heard this, they would definitely think that the couple in this story was affectionate and helpless, and that the fiancé was naturally the vicious and unlikable villain. Gu Xingyin sneered. Not to mention that the Liang estate originally didn't have the intention to marry into the North vanquishing prince's estate. That imperial edict was also personally requested by the old princess consort of the North vanquishing prince's estate. How could the Liang residents be considered as breaking up an affectionate couple? Moreover, if he had known that Qin Yuanzheng had such a childhood sweetheart, Grand Tutor Liang would not have been willing to betroth his daughter to such a family even if he had to defy the imperial edict. Truly, what a sharp tongue that could distort black and white. Seeing Zhang Mingxiu looking at him pitifully, Gu Xingyin knew in his heart that she definitely wanted him to say something. It would be best if he could stand with her against a common enemy and denounce that vicious fiancé of his. She wouldn't let her have her way. Gu Xingyin looked worried as she looked at Zhang Mingxiu with concern. What plans do you have for the future? Since your cousin's marriage was bestowed by the emperor, it is impossible for him to be divorced. A person like younger sister, of course, would not let herself be a lowly concubine. When she talked about being a concubine, Gu Xingyin's face didn't conceal her disdain. Zhang Mingxiu was choked by her words. She never would have thought that Gu Xingyin would say this. A normal person's train of thought would be to pity her, and then comfort her while angrily denounce her cousin's fiancé, right? Moreover, when Gu Xingyin said these words, no matter how thick Zhang Mingxiu's skin was, she was too embarrassed to say that she was planning to become the lowly concubine that she was talking about. No, she couldn't even be considered a concubine. In any case, a concubine still had a status. Her current appearance could only be considered as a shameful outside wife. Chapter 327. For a moment, Zhang Mingxiu felt so ashamed that she wanted to die. However, Gu Xingyin didn't let her go. She said with a tone of, I think, sister, you'd better stay away from your cousin in the future. Otherwise, the most important thing for a girl is her reputation. You know, it's usually the girls who are hurt by this kind of thing. If your cousin is really good for you, he should be more conscious and not meet you again. He should choose a good marriage for you. How could Zhang Mingxiu listen to such words? She forced a smile and said, Sister Meng, I'm not feeling well. I can't entertain you today. Please forgive me. Without waiting for Gu Xingyin to say anything else, she asked her maidservant to see the guest out. Gu Xingyin left, but Zhang Mingxiu's heart was pierced by a thorn. She used to live in a high pavilion built for her by Qin Yuanzheng, and never had to face these things. In fact, she knew that if she wanted to be with her cousin, she could only be a humble concubine. But her cousin promised very well. Even if he married a wife, he would not touch her. His heart was with her, and he would not share it with others. My cousin loves me. Thinking so, she smiled sweetly. As for what Gu Xingyin said to her before, she didn't want to think about it at all. With her family background, even if Jinbei Wang Fei made the decision, what kind of good family could she marry? There was a cousin who loved her and an aunt who loved her. How could it not be better than marrying? If her thoughts were heard by those sharp-tongued old maids outside, they would probably curse her fiercely. You're born to be a bitch. You don't want to be the legal wife of a decent family, but you want to be a concubine. On the other side, Qin Xiao, who heard the report of his secret guard, couldn't help laughing. His little junior sister was really interesting. Qin Xiao could almost imagine Zhang Mingshu's face turning blue when his little junior sister said those words. It was obviously a selfless statement, but every word poked at Zhang Mingshu's sore spot. However, if his little junior sister knew that the cousin mentioned by the woman in front of her was her fiancé, then, and the vicious fiancé she was talking about was her, she didn't know how sad she must be. Xian the Emperor felt that he had really lost his head when he had decreed the marriage. And the residence of North Vanquishing Prince. Thinking of Zhang Mingshu's words, his eyes suddenly turned cold. What do you mean by breaking up an affectionate couple and oppressing them with your power? If it weren't for the old Princess Jinbei's old age, he wouldn't have agreed to the marriage with the Liang family. Could it be that her teacher's daughter was not good enough for a fallen prince? However, he regretted it now. He regretted that he didn't investigate and betroth his junior sister to such a family. The more he knew about the North Vanquishing Prince's mansion, Qin Yuanzheng and Zhang Mingshu, the more disgusted he was with this family. What did he mean by, "I've given my heart to you. Even if we get married, I won't touch her at all"? Qin Yuanzheng was actually planning to make his little junior sister a widow. The emperor's eyes suddenly turned cold. He had to think carefully about the current situation of Lord Jinbei's residence. On the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, the Mid-Autumn Festival was held in the palace. As the daughter of the imperial preceptor, Gu Xingyin naturally followed her mother and grandmother into the palace. Of course, the womenfolk and the officials were received in different places. Because the emperor had not yet married, the affairs of the Hogong were still managed by the Empress Dowager. Gu Xingyin and the other womenfolk of the officials went to the Peaceful Life Palace where the Empress Dowager was. Chapter 328. The Empress Dowager was not old. She seemed to be in her 40s. Of course, her real age was a little older than she looked. As an elder, Great Elder Princess Ronghua was naturally treated with courtesy, and was arranged to sit in the seat closest to the main seat. According to the rules, the Meng family and others were supposed to sit according to their ranks. However, Gu Xingyin was held in the arms of Great Elder Princess Ronghua with a smile, so she had to sit in the most conspicuous seat with her grandmother. This made her receive a lot of stares, especially from some families who wanted to send their daughters to the palace. They all looked at Gu Xingyin with scrutinizing eyes. After recognizing her, these gazes became much friendlier. After all, those who could sit here were all well informed. They all knew that Grand Tutor Liang's legitimate daughter was engaged to the heir of Lord Jinbei. As members of the imperial family, Lord Jinbei and the old princess naturally sat in the front seats. At this moment, they were also looking at Gu Xingyin up and down. The old princess saw that she sat on one side with a perfect posture and appearance. Under the gaze of so many people, the old princess nodded in her heart. Lord Jinbei was not so happy. Zhang Mingshu was her niece. It was because of this future daughter-in-law that she was sent to the side yard. Thus, it was difficult for her to have a good impression of Gu Xingyin. Needless to say, Gu Xingyin was exquisite and gorgeous, which made her feel a sense of crisis in her heart. She was worried that her son would neglect Mingshu after they got married. She was afraid that her son would like the legal wife and neglect the concubine. It had to be said that Lord Jinbei's mind was really filled with something. Of course, Gu Xingyin received the stares of Lord Jinbei, but she was too blatant, which really disgusted her. Great Elder Princess Ronghua beside her gently patted her hand and looked straight at Lord Jinbei. Lord Jinbei suddenly met Great Elder Princess's stern eyes. In a panic, she lowered her eyes and did not dare to look at her. The old princess consort looked at her daughter-in-law in disappointment. She had been a princess consort for so many years, but she didn't have the bearing of a princess consort at all. The purpose of such a banquet was nothing more than to enjoy the performances of the actors in the palace. The madams who were familiar with each other greeted each other, and the Empress Dowager rewarded them with some gifts. Gu Xingyin felt a little bored and found an excuse to sneak out. At this moment, the imperial garden was very quiet because all the officials and their families were at the front. The lights were very bright, and Gu Xingyin was led by the little chamberlain to slowly appreciate the beautiful scenery that had been forgotten by others. However, "Do you have anything to quench your thirst?" Gu Xingyin asked. The young servant replied in a clear and crisp voice, "Yes, there is. However, it will take some time for this servant to get it. Miss, you may as well wait in the small pavilion in front." Seeing Gu Xingyin nod her head, the young eunuch repeatedly emphasized that she should not wander around, in case she got lost in the imperial garden and bumped into others. Then she left. After she left, Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. She found the small pavilion and sat down in a comfortable posture. She had to drink a cup of wine when the Empress Dowager gave her the wine. However, she couldn't drink a drop of wine, so she was drunk at this moment. She shook her head to sober herself up, and looked up to see a tree of flowers reaching in through the eaves of the pavilion. She didn't know what kind of flower it was, but the large clusters of petals were blooming beautifully. She wanted to reach out her hand to reach it. Chapter 329. When Qin Xiao came here, he saw a scene that made him unable to restrain a smile. A little drunk cat with hazy eyes was sitting comfortably on an armchair in the pavilion, trying to reach out her hand to reach a flower in front of her. The flower was neither too far nor too close. If she could straighten her body, she could pick it. However, she was unwilling to get up slightly. She just waved her hand in the air again and again in vain. Qin Xiao had seen Gu Xingyin several times. Every time he saw her, she was dignified and polite, with a perfect appearance. When had he seen her like this? He found it interesting for a moment, and didn't make a sound. He just stood there and watched her grab the flower again and again. Her silky clothes fell from her arms with her movements, revealing a small part of her white jade-like arm. Qin Xiao looked and only felt that the flower was not even half as beautiful as her skin. Thinking of what he had just thought, Qin Xiao's old face turned red. He spurned himself. Just now, he actually had such thoughts about a little girl who was nearly 10 years younger than him. He was about to leave when Gu Xingyin seemed to be annoyed. She propped herself up and plucked the flower as she wished. Gu Xingyin showed a satisfied smile, and gently put the flower to her nose to sniff. However, in the eyes of the emperor, the flower was completely overshadowed by her satisfied smile. He didn't know why, but a thought popped up in his mind. If he could make her smile like this all the time, any man would be willing to give up everything, right? For a moment, he was actually a little jealous of Qin Yuanzheng. However, Gu Xingyin brought a big disaster upon herself. She was originally drunk and barely managed to stand up by leaning on the armchair. As soon as she got the flower, she forgot herself and turned around. Her left foot tripped her right foot, and she stumbled and fell down. However, she didn't feel it at all, and even had a smile on her face. Qin Xiao hadn't thought about whether to pull her up yet, but his body had already reacted faster, and hugged her in his arms. So small. This was Qin Xiao's first feeling. The little girl in his arms was soft, petite, and fragrant. Once he hugged her, he didn't want to let go. When he looked again, he was so angry that he laughed. This heartless little girl was already holding the flower. God knows what sweet dream she was having. "Your Majesty." The little attendant came over with the hangover soup, and saw Qin Xiao holding a girl in his arms. He was so scared that he hurriedly knelt down. The tenderness on Qin Xiao's face disappeared, and he said coldly, "The young lady of the Grand Tutor's family is drunk. Go find 2 palace maids to take her to rest for a while, and also go cook some hangover soup. Go and inform Great Elder Princess." "Yes, Your Majesty." The chamberlain hurriedly left. As for what he shouldn't have seen, he didn't see anything. On this side, Gu Xingyin felt that she had fallen into a familiar embrace full of lotus fragrance. She subconsciously snuggled closer to Qin Xiao's embrace, and even habitually raised her hands to wrap around his waist. She was completely unaware that her embrace was extremely stiff. Qin Xiao was a little overwhelmed. Since he became an adult, no one had ever dared to hold him like this. But looking at the little girl's dependent and satisfied expression, he strangely felt a sweetness in his heart. Stop. She was someone else's fiancée. Qin Xiao tried hard to convince himself to ignore the faint reluctance in his heart. He put her down and leaned against the chair. Chapter 330. Gu Xingyin was gently woken up by a maid in the palace. After all, she was the daughter of an official. If it was said that she was drunk and stayed in the palace, it would damage her reputation. After drinking a bowl of hangover soup, Gu Xingyin finally sobered up. In a trance, she remembered a hug full of lotus fragrance. Was it Emperor Xianda who sent her back? She tentatively asked the maid beside her. I am not good at drinking. I don't know which sister sent me here. I should thank her. The maid beside her smiled and bowed. This is my responsibility. Miss Liang, you are too polite. She saw that His Majesty treated Miss Liang carefully, as if she was a treasure. Of course he was very polite to Gu Xingyin. But His Majesty ordered that no one should say anything about what happened before, so she took the credit. Gu Xingyin felt a wave of disappointment in his heart, but he did not show it on his face. He thanked him and checked his clothes. After making sure that there was nothing wrong with them, he walked to the banquet area under the guidance of the female official. The palace banquet was just about to end. When Great Elder Princess Ronghua saw her granddaughter, she couldn't help but blame. Where did you go? If you didn't come back, I would have sent someone to find you. Gu Xingyin smiled and held her grandmother's hand. Granddaughter drank too much and was a little drunk. So I stood in the wind for a while to sober myself up. Great Elder Princess knew that her granddaughter couldn't drink. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with her, she was relieved. After the palace banquet, Gu Xingyin went back to the Fu with the elders of the family. But Emperor Xianda was in a dilemma. When he was alone, the little girl's figure would finally appear in his mind. The way she looked at him with her round eyes, the way she sniffed the fresh flowers with a satisfied expression, and the way she nestled in his arms obediently. Qin Xiao closed his eyes hard and repeatedly told himself that she was not someone he could touch. At this time, Fu Shi, the chamberlain, came to report that Empress Dowager invited His Majesty to the Peaceful Life Palace. Qin Xiao pinched his eyebrows and had a headache. He didn't even need to think to know what his mother was thinking. It was nothing more than the problem of having no one in the imperial harem, and the imperial family having no children. But the problem was that he really had no interest in those women. When he was 16 years old, the late emperor assigned him 2 palace maids to teach him about human affairs. In the end, he flew into a rare rage and directly threw them out of the carriage. He also said to the late emperor that he was wholeheartedly devoted to learning, and did not like women. At that time, this matter had been delayed. After he ascended the throne and became the emperor, no one could control him anymore. The Empress Dowager had spent a great deal of effort on this matter. Every year, the Flower Appreciation Banquet and the Moon Appreciation Banquet would be held several times in the palace. The purpose was self-evident. However, every time Qin Xiao's reply was only one: Zhen doesn't like it. This time he finally found someone he liked. Unfortunately, he had already pointed her out to someone else. The wife of an official should not be taken advantage of. Qin Yuanzheng, I'll give you another chance. If you don't know how to cherish it, then don't blame me for being impolite. Gu Xingyin didn't know that so much information had passed through her lover's mind during a simple palace banquet. She was very busy during this period of time. She was busy with her chance encounter with Qin Yuanzheng and being Zhang Mingshu's caring older sister. It had to be said that Zhang Mingshu's eloquence was quite good. Even Gu Xingyin's personal maid Jian Jia, after seeing her courtyard several times, began to pity this Miss Zhang who was cruelly persecuted by her sweetheart's fiancé. Chapter 331. Miss, what a coincidence. Qin Yuanzheng looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. Gu Xingyin also nodded at Qin Yuanzheng in surprise. She said in her heart, "What a coincidence. I came because I knew you were here." Qin Yuanzheng was really happy. He originally thought that in this world, other than his cousin, no other woman would be able to touch his heart. However, perhaps this woman whom he had never even met before was too outstanding, making it hard for him to forget her after only seeing her once. There had never been a woman who could talk so well with him. If Gu Xingyin knew what he was thinking, she would laugh. "I came because of your hobby. How can I not talk well with you?" Moreover, how many of the young ladies from the noble families in the capital would talk so much with a strange man? Even Gu Xingyin wore a veil when she met Qin Yuanzheng. This time, Gu Xingyin was followed by two maids. Qin Yuanzheng wanted to be close to Gu Xingyin, so he invited her to play a game. Jianjia and Jilan secretly pulled Gu Xingyin's sleeves, but they were stopped by Gu Xingyin's eyes. The folk customs of the kingdom of Qi had always been more open. It was not a shocking practice to play chess with others in the Go Club. Moreover, Gu Xingyin did not even reveal her identity. She even brought two maids with her. Seeing Gu Xingyin agree, Qin Yuanzheng was very happy. They did not tell each other their names. Gu Xingyin deliberately did not say it, and Qin Yuanzheng felt that it was rare to meet a confidant. It would be vulgar if he revealed his identity. So, the two strangers chatted happily. Gu Xingyin played white, and Qin Yuanzheng played black. Both of them were not in the mood to play chess. Maybe it was because Gu Xingyin's quiet appearance made people want to talk, or maybe it was because the incense in the incense burner was too intoxicating. In short, Qin Yuanzheng suddenly wanted to tell Gu Xingyin about the troubles in his heart. Gu Xingyin pointed at him at the right time. "I see that you seem to have something on your mind." Qin Yuanzheng smiled bitterly. "There is a problem that has been bothering me for a long time, but I shouldn't tell you." Gu Xingyin said faintly, "You and I have only met by chance. If you think it's convenient, you can tell me. We might not have the chance to meet again next time." Qin Yuanzheng's heart skipped a beat. That's right, it was already a rare fate for the two of them to meet. In such a big capital city, he might not have the chance to meet the woman in front of him again. Ignoring the reluctance in his heart, Qin Yuanzheng spoke slowly. Gu Xingyin was surprised that Qin Yuanzheng would tell others about her and her cousin. "So you're saying that young master is deeply in love with someone else. Yet he has no choice but to marry an influential lady who is already engaged." Gu Xingyin pointed out the crux of the matter. Qin Yuanzheng nodded bitterly. Gu Xingyin thought more highly of this person because of his narration. In his narration, he did not belittle the Liang family and Liang Qinyu. This person was not a villain. However, he didn't seem to have any intention of changing the current situation. His entire person was very cowardly. "To be honest, young master, if this goes on, you won't be able to treat your wife well after marrying her. Your beloved can't even enter the family, and can only be a lowly mistress. You're harming two people by doing this." Gu Xingyin mercilessly poked at his scar. Chapter 332. How could Qin Yuanzheng not know this in his heart? In the end, it was just because of selfishness. He was reluctant to disobey the imperial edict. He was worried that the royal family would punish the northern palace, and he was worried that he would be on bad terms with the imperial tutor. Gu Xingyin looked at Qin Yuanzheng, who was sitting there silently. She decided to add more information. "Young master, in your heart, is your virginity more important or your future more important?" She didn't give Qin Yuanzheng any leeway to retreat and said in a serious tone, "If young master thinks that your future is important, then you should properly marry your fiancée and treat her well after marriage. You should completely cut off all ties with your beloved. If you think your virginity is important, then I don't need to say more. Do you have the heart to let your beloved woman be a concubine that everyone despises? Let me give you another piece of advice. Don't treat women as fools. If you really marry her and don't take it seriously, then do you think the pampered young lady who grew up is a pushover? Don't go for wool and come home shorn." Gu Xingyin suddenly threw away the chess piece in her hand and stood up. "I thought I met someone who understands me. I didn't expect that you and I are not the same kind of people. Goodbye." She ignored Qin Yuanzheng's urging and left with her servant without looking back. "Young miss, What you said was great. Jianjia followed behind and praised. Oh. Then tell me what's good about it. Gu Xingyin asked deliberately. Jianjia blushed. Although I am not as well read as you, I can't say what's good about it. But I think what you said is reasonable. Gu Xingyin glanced at her. You only know how to say good things. Jilan was also very happy. Originally, I saw that young miss and that young master were talking happily. I was a little worried. She wanted to say something but stopped. Worried that I will be tempted? Gu Xingyin continued her words. Jilan's face turned red. Young miss, please forgive me. Gu Xingyin's tone was cold. What kind of person do you think I am? I am a person who has an engagement. How can I be tempted easily? How is that different from those shameless people? What's more, that young master looks like a good man, but after talking with him today, I found out that he's a man without any sense of responsibility. How could such a person be worthy of my interest? When her words reached Qin Xiao's ears, Qin Xiao laughed. Well said. How could a cowardly man like Qin Yuanzheng be worthy of his little girl? When Qin Xiao heard the shadow guard say that Gu Xingyin had gone to see Qin Yuanzheng, his heart was extremely vexed. In the end, when he heard the following words, especially Gu Xingyin's sentence, "You and I are not kindred spirits," he felt both physically and mentally comfortable. She was indeed worthy of being the Grand Tutor's wife. Her knowledge was different from others. Her way of thinking was simply the same as mine. At this time, Xian de Emperor's mood was very good. In his mind, there was no chance of the marriage between Zhenbei Wangfu and Grand Tutor Liang Fu. He thought for a moment and came up with an idea. However, he was worried that the little girl would not be able to take it when she found out the truth. On this side, Gu Xingyin did not know that she had a godly assistant. She was waiting for Qin Yuanzheng's choice. Of course, no matter what choice Qin Yuanzheng made, she would make the two of them taste the bitter consequences. It had to be said that Qin Yuanzheng's choice was to go to Zhang Mingshu. When Gu Xingyin saw Zhang Mingshu at first glance, she knew what Qin Yuanzheng had chosen in the end. This was within her expectations. In front of her, Zhang Mingshu's eyes were red and swollen, her face pale, and there were faint dark circles under her eyes. She clearly looked like she had cried the entire night without sleeping. Chapter 333. Gu Xingyin was very surprised and asked her what was wrong. Zhang Mingshu had regarded Gu Xingyin as a close friend these days. Hearing her question, the tears that she had stopped with difficulty flowed out. Cousin came to me yesterday. Zhang Mingshu began to wipe her tears with a handkerchief when she mentioned this. Gu Xingyin did not speak, waiting for her to continue. He told me that he was going to get married in a year. He told me to forget about him and find a good family to marry. He also said that he would never come back again. Zhang Mingshu's entire body was covered in tears. Gu Xingyin looked at her coldly. He did not know how much of her tears were because of her love, and how much was because she was sad that the riches and honor in her hands had flown away. She did not know what would happen in the future. Gu Xingyin patted her back gently and said slowly, "Isn't this a good thing? Unless your cousin can marry you as his legal wife, otherwise you can marry a good family and be a noble legal wife. How can it not be better than being a concubine?" What do you know? Zhang Mingshu was emotional at this time. Her mind was full of the loss of wealth, and she spoke without thinking. My cousin doesn't want me. What's the use of marrying someone else? Can I have a higher status than my cousin's family? Can you let me live the life of a noble and respectable person? Rather than marrying a small family to be the legal wife, it's better to marry my cousin. As soon as she finished speaking, she seemed to release the depression that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time. Gu Xingyin was so angry that he was trembling all over. You, Zhang Mingshu, I never expected you to be such a greedy, self-deprecating woman. To think that I thought you were someone who understood me. I was really blind. She was so angry that she picked up the scissors on the table, twisted the handkerchief in her hand into several pieces, and threw them on the ground. I don't want to associate with people like you. Let's break up. Zhang Mingshu was also impulsive. Seeing that Gu Xingyin was so serious, she quickly said, I just said a few words out of anger. Sister Meng, why do you take it seriously? Gu Xingyin had already calmed down. She broke free from Zhang Mingshu's grip and gently brushed her sleeves, as if there was something dirty on them. Her movements were smooth and unspeakably beautiful. She seemed to have changed into another person. She was no longer the real Miss Meng that Zhang Mingshu knew. "Who's your sister?" "Miss Zhang, please be careful with your words." She glanced at Zhang Mingshu coldly and distantly, and ordered the servant girl guarding outside to leave. Zhang Mingshu was angered by her previous action of disdain. She didn't urge her to stay. Instead, she sneered and said, "I knew it. An official's daughter like you has never thought highly of me, right? How can people like you, who are born high and mighty, understand my feelings? Since you don't like me, I won't give up my face to beg you. Let's cut off all ties. Miss Meng, don't come again in the future." Gu Xingyin's footsteps paused. In the end, she straightened her back and walked out of the door without looking back. After getting on the carriage, Gu Xingyin leaned against the seat of the carriage tiredly. "Miss, what Miss Zhang said was too much." Although Jianjia didn't know what the two of them said, she knew that there was something unpleasant between the two of them when she heard what Zhang Mingshu said at the end. "In the future, don't mention her in front of me. I don't want to associate with people like her," Gu Xingyin said coldly. Chapter 334. Jianjia and Jilan rarely saw their miss so angry. They didn't know what that Zhang Mingshu had done. The two trembled in fear as they followed Gu Xingyin back to the Fu. Entering her room, Gu Xingyin ordered them not to tell her family what had happened today, and sent them to guard outside the room. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. Finally, she had gotten rid of these two people. Presumably, Zhang Mingshu's days would be very difficult, and Qin Yuanjing wouldn't be much better, right? Next, she just had to wait for an opportunity to dissolve her engagement with him. Gu Xingyin didn't think that this opportunity would come so quickly. The reason was Xianda Emperor Qin Xiao. Ever since Qin Xiao understood his feelings for Taifu family's little Shimi, he arranged for a secret guard to be by her side, mainly to protect her safety. And Qin Yuanjing and Zhang Mingshu naturally had secret guards by their side. However, Qin Xiao would not pay attention to any privacy when dealing with these two people. Even the number of times the two people woke up at night was investigated clearly by others. He also clearly knew the conversation between Gu Xingyin and Zhang Mingshu. That woman, she dares to be fierce to little Shimi? Qin Xiao was furious. In his heart, Gu Xingyin was a treasure at the tip of his heart. What was Zhang Mingshu? She dared to speak to her like that? Zhang Mingshu had become a dead object in Qin Xiao's heart. Of course, with her, there was also her good Biaoga. The present Qin Xiao impatiently wanted his little girl to see the true faces of these two people, to know that the fiancé she had been looking forward to was that kind of man. The emperor wanted to find an opportunity. The opportunity would naturally be sent to him. The autumn hunt. Qin Yuanzheng, who had always been mediocre and not favored by the emperor, was actually chosen by the emperor to be his personal attendant. The entire northern Zhenwang Fu was excited. It had to be known that in an occasion like the autumn hunt, those who could accompany the emperor were all extremely favored officials, or officials favored by the emperor. Could it be that the emperor wanted to put their northern Zhenwang Fu in an important position again? The old princess consort specially called her grandson over. "Yuanzheng, you must perform well this time and strive to leave a good impression in front of His Majesty. The prosperity of our North Jinbei mansion depends on you." Qin Yuanzheng was full of confidence. "Grandmother, don't worry. I won't let you down." He wouldn't let His Majesty down either. He didn't say the last sentence, but the smug look on his face said it all. Gu Xingyin was also going to attend the autumn hunt. The kingdom of Qi was founded on martial prowess. Therefore, even if the noble women of the kingdom of Qi were not proficient in it, they still had to know some simple riding and archery. Gu Xingyin was wearing a fiery red riding outfit. The close-fitting design perfectly outlined her figure. Her long black hair was tied up high with a white jade buckle, revealing her delicate face. His gentle smile was incomparably dazzling. Gu Xingyin came with her second sister, Liang Jinyu. Because Liang Lingyu was too young, this kind of occasion wasn't suitable for her. When they arrived at the hunting ground, except for Liang Jinyu and a few young ladies who had a good relationship with the Liang sisters, The rest of the people actually all stayed away from Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin glanced at them and was a little puzzled. Could it be that they looked like scourges? Liang Jinyu looked at her and knew that she didn't feel the lethality of her appearance. Who would be willing to stand with someone who could easily suppress them to the point that they lost their shine? Chapter 335. By this time, Gu Xingyin already knew that the northern Wang Shixi, Qin Yuanzheng, had been appointed as an attendant by His Majesty. Her mind spun, and she thought of a wonderful idea. With so many people as witnesses to the autumn hunt, if she fainted from fright when she saw her fiancé, it would definitely attract the attention of countless people. At that time, she would spread all the rumors about Qin Yuanzheng and Zhang Mingshu. She would even hear that Qin Yuanzheng had personally said that he would only love Biao Mei. Even if Northern Wang Fu didn't want to cancel this marriage, they would have to cancel it. And even if the marriage was cancelled, the one who would lose face would be Northern Wang Fu. As to Gu Xingyin herself, at most, people would sigh and say that she was pitiful, and her marriage would be more difficult in the future. However, since Xian the Emperor was her lover, no matter how difficult his marriage would be, she could not marry anyone else. Gu Xingyin was very calm. But even though the autumn hunt did not pay attention to the boundaries between men and women, His Majesty was not someone that women like her could see whenever they wanted. Gu Xingyin was still letting her imagination run wild when a lady beside her called out to her. It turned out that the autumn hunt had begun. She hurriedly urged her horse to catch up. What Gu Xingyin did not know was that while she was worrying about how to get close to His Majesty, she had already attracted the gazes of countless people. Under the sunlight, the young girl dressed in fiery red riding attire had a beautiful appearance. Her black hair flying and her entire person seemed to glow. Many of the noble sons looked with infatuation at her, and secretly thought that the northern Wang Shixi was really lucky to be able to marry such an outstanding beauty. Gu Xingyin had the system, and naturally knew where the emperor was. She thought for a while and couldn't find a reason, so she decided not to find one. The hunting grounds were so big, there was no rule that said who owned a piece of land. It was just a coincidence, couldn't it be? So Gu Xingyin walked as she looked and quickly neared the group the emperor was in. On this side, Qin Xiao was chasing a goat on his horse. The goat had already been surrounded and could not retreat. Qin Yuanzheng wanted to show off in front of the emperor, and did not hesitate to shoot an arrow. However, there was another arrow that was even faster than his, ruthlessly piercing into the goat's throat. Everyone turned to look at the owner of the arrow. The girl in red rode her horse over. Her entire being was as bright and beautiful as a cluster of burning flames. A smile unknowingly appeared on Qin Xiao's face. Just as he was about to move forward, he thought of something and looked at Qin Yuanzheng behind him. As expected, she saw a trace of amazement in his eyes. Humph! Xian the Emperor snorted coldly. In a moment, Zhen will let you experience what it means to go from heaven to hell. Gu Xingyin also saw the emperor and his entourage. She knew Qin Xiao, so it was naturally impossible for her to pretend that she didn't see him. She urged her horse forward and saluted. "This subject greets your majesty." Qin Xiao smiled. "Shimi need not be so courteous." Gu Xingyin glanced to his side. When she saw Qin Yuanzheng, she exclaimed softly, "Eh." Qin Xiao asked calmly, "Does junior sister have any old acquaintances?" Gu Xingyin smiled and shook her head. "Other than His Majesty, who else do I know?" From the moment that young female appeared, Qin Yuanzheng felt several of his colleagues steal admiring glances at him. At first, he didn't understand, but when he heard the conversation between her and His Majesty, he suddenly understood the identity of the person in front of him. There was only one person in the entire country of Qi that could call His Majesty Xixiang. His fiancée, Grand Tutor Liang's only daughter, Liang Chenyu. Chapter 336. Qin Yuanzheng was originally very resistant to this fiancée, because he always felt that without her, there would be no obstruction between him and his cousin, and he would not have to choose between love and his future. Thinking of this, he inexplicably felt that the girl in front of him was somewhat familiar. But at this moment, the envious gazes from his colleagues made him feel proud, and his ill feelings towards Gu Xingyin also disappeared a lot. Qin Xiao suddenly said, "Little junior sister, it's okay if you don't know the others here today, but there is one person who is hard to come by, you have to take a good look at him." As soon as he said this, everyone understood what he meant. Qin Yuanzheng was inexplicably nervous. A man's dignity was at play, and in front of his fiancée, he still hoped that he could leave a good impression. Gu Xingyin. Very good, worthy of being my lover, he is indeed a godly assistant. She had not thought of how to let others reveal Qin Yuanzheng's identity, and he had already taken the lead. So she very cooperatively looked at Qin Xiao with a puzzled gaze. Qin Xiao was a little reluctant about what was going to happen, but he understood the principle of making a decision. He pointed at Qin Yuanzheng. "This is the heir of North Zhenbei Wang, Qin Yuanzheng." He could not say the words "the person who is engaged to you," nor did he want to say it. Qin Yuanzheng smiled. "I have heard a lot about you, Miss Liang." He waited for Gu Xingyin to return the greeting. However, Qin Yuanzheng thought of many possibilities, but he did not expect Gu Xingyin to have such a reaction. She seemed to be frightened by Qin Xiao's words. Hearing his name, Qin Yuanzheng was stunned for a while, staring at Qin Yuanzheng. "You are the heir of North Zhenbei Wang?" Her face was a little pale, and there seemed to be a lot of strange things in her eyes. Qin Yuanzheng secretly wondered if he knew this Miss Liang, but after thinking carefully for a long time, he shook his head. Impossible, with her appearance, if he had seen her, he would not forget. He nodded. "I am the heir of North Zhenbei Wang, Qin Yuanzheng." Then she saw Gu Xingyin's face turn pale. She looked at her with hatred and disdain, as if she had seen something dirty. Then the girl closed her eyes and collapsed. She was still on horseback. If she fell off, it would not be a small matter. Before the crowd could react, they saw a figure flash by and catch the unconscious Gu Xingyin. Who else could it be but Xian the Emperor? Qin Xiao seemed to be somewhat flustered. He carried Gu Xingyin onto the horse and walked back, saying, "Summon the imperial physician to wait at Zhen's resting place." This unforeseen event really left people scratching their heads. However, many people turned to look at Qin Yuanzheng. The expression of the Liang clan's young miss earlier didn't seem like she was looking at her fiancé. It was simply as if she had seen something extremely hateful and disgusting. But judging from her previous behavior, it was clear that she didn't know the crown prince of North Vanquishing Prince. There were also a few people whose minds moved quickly. From the unusual reaction of the emperor, they caught a hint of something else. Qin Xiao was slightly shocked and angry at this time. He hadn't thought that Gu Xingyin, who knew the truth, would have such a big reaction. If he had known, he closed his eyes. He was very clear about his personality. Even if he had known, he would have done the same. He could not bear to see his little girl think of another man as her future reliance. Thinking like this, his anger towards Qin Yuanzheng became even stronger. Chapter 337. Only Qin Yuanzheng was confused. He didn't know what he had done to cause Gu Xingyin to show such an expression as though she had suffered a great blow. Inside the emperor's tent, Xian the emperor had already put down Gu Xingyin and was standing guard at her side. The Tai hadn't come yet. He had already sent someone to inform the Grand Tutor Fu. This old official is the director of the Imperial Hospital, Yuan. The Tai that had hurried over was preparing to kneel when he was pulled up by the impatient emperor. "You are excused. Quick, see how is Liang Xiaojia." Qin Xiao was very impatient at this time. The old Tai didn't dare to delay and hurriedly walked to Gu Xingyin's side. He said, "I have been impolite." Then he put his hand on Gu Xingyin's pulse. "How is it?" Qin Xiao asked. Yuan Tai stood and said, "I see that this Xiaojia's face is pale and her heart rate is abnormal. She seems to have suffered a great shock." Qin Xiao thought. "Wasn't it a shock?" He asked, "Is it serious?" Yuan Tai shook his head. "I think that Xiaojia pays attention to her health. This time, she fainted due to anger. When she wakes up, this old official will prescribe some medicine to calm the mind. She will be fine after taking a few doses." Qin Xiao's heart finally relaxed. It was good that she was fine. If little Shimi was left with an illness because of this, he would really regret it. In the meantime, Grand Tutor Liang and the people of the Liang Fu that were participating in the autumn hunt had rushed over and asked what had happened. Qin Xiao knew everything but he couldn't say, "I also don't know." Little Shimmy saw North vanquishing Wang Shixi and suddenly fainted with a pale face. Grand Tutor Liang's brow was deeply furrowed. His impression of North vanquishing Wang Fu became even worse. A short while later, Gu Xingyin woke up. Her face was still pale, but she wasn't willing to say anything. She only said that she wanted to go home. Qin Xiao could only send someone to send her back to the Liang Fu. Grand Tutor Liang and the others naturally followed them back to the Fu with worry. Qin Xiao especially wanted to go with them to the Liang Manor to take a look. However, with his identity here, every move of the monarch of a country was being watched. There was simply no way for him to leave. Gu Xingyin went back to the mansion in silence. Madame Meng, who had already received the news, greeted her at the gate in person. Her eyes turned red when she saw Gu Xingyin's appearance. "Mother, what's wrong with you?" She hugged her daughter. Gu Xingyin only said one sentence. "Mother, I want to go back to my room. Ask them to leave." This meant that he had something to say to her. When the two of them entered Gu Xingyin's courtyard, Madame Meng dismissed the servants. When she walked to her daughter's side, she saw her daughter's tears rolling down like beads. "Mother." Gu Xingyin seemed to have vented all the grievances she had suffered along the way. She hugged her mother and began to cry. Madame Meng was frightened. Her daughter had been pampered and raised since childhood. When had she ever suffered any grievances? Moreover, her Yu had always been an open-minded person. Madame Meng had never seen her daughter cry so sadly. Don't cry, mother's good Yu." She slowly patted the back of her daughter in her arms and softly comforted her. After an unknown amount of time, when her daughter's crying gradually stopped, Madame Meng knew that she had vented enough and began to ask what had happened. "I want to break off the engagement." The girl in her arms raised her head. There were still traces of tears on her face, and her eyes were still red and swollen. However, the anger and disdain in her eyes were not hidden at all. Madame Meng never thought that her daughter's first words would be this. Chapter 338. She was shocked and wanted to ask the reason immediately. Gu Xingyin gritted her teeth and told her what happened to Qin Yuanjing a few days ago. From the first time they met, they had a good conversation. Later, Qin Yuanjing confessed his love for her and said that he only loved his cousin in his life. "Mother, I can't bear such a humiliation. If I really marry him, I'd rather die." Gu Xingyin's eyes turned red again. At this time, Madame Meng was also angry. Hearing her daughter's words, she scolded her softly. "What nonsense are you talking about?" She said coldly, "Don't worry. Our Grand Tutor's mansion is not to be trifled with. North Prince's mansion has gone too far." Madame Meng looked at Gu Xingyin sympathetically. "Don't worry and have a good rest. I'll discuss it with your grandmother. Don't worry, I won't let you marry into such a family." Gu Xingyin nodded obediently. Under Madame Meng's gaze, she covered herself with the quilt and closed her eyes. Madame Meng went to Great Elder Princess's courtyard with anger. Grand Tutor Liang was also there. "Mother." Great Elder Princess was also very anxious. When she saw Madame Meng, she hurriedly asked, "How is my Yu?" Madame Meng forced a smile and said, "She just hugged me and cried. I saw that she was very tired, so I let her have a rest first. I didn't come to pay my respects to you. Mother, please forgive me for making the decision without your permission." Great Elder Princess was very anxious when she heard that her granddaughter cried. She glared at her and said, "What time is it now? Don't play tricks with me. Just tell me, what's wrong with you?" Grand Tutor Liang also looked at his wife with an urging face. Madame Meng waved her hand to let the surrounding maids leave. Then she told Great Elder Princess Ronghua what Gu Xingyin said in full detail. Great Elder Princess Ronghua was so angry that she smashed the teacup in her hand on the spot. "How dare Qin Yuanzheng and North Prince's mansion? I thought they had already disposed of that woman. I didn't expect that they kept her as a mistress. He even wants my granddaughter to live as a widow for him." She then glanced at her son who was standing on the side in a similarly angry manner, and scolded. "At that time, I already said that Jinbei Wang's residence is not a good family, and that their Wangfei is not presentable. You even said that His Majesty's decree cannot be disobeyed?" Now she's pushing her own daughter into the fire pit. Grand Tutor Liang also smiled bitterly. If he had known that the crown prince of North Vanquishing Prince was such a person, he would not have agreed to this marriage even if he had to defy the imperial edict. But at this time his mother was angry, so he could only smile bitterly and apologize. Great Elder Princess Ronghua scolded and burst into tears again. My poor Yuer, a girl who was raised in a noble family, should be insulted like this. This is, when she cried, Madame Meng also shed tears. Grand Tutor Liang was calm at this time. He comforted them and said in a low voice, in any case, the marriage with North Vanquishing Prince's mansion can't be done. I'll go to the palace to see His Majesty and beg him to withdraw the decree. Great Elder Princess Ronghua also nodded. She wiped away her tears and said, I'll go with you. If His Majesty doesn't agree, I'll give up my old face. I don't believe that His Majesty will really watch me kneel in the Heavenly Dragon Palace until I die. The people of the Liang Mansion entered the palace in a mighty manner. Emperor Xianda had been waiting for a long time. If he knew the thoughts of the people of the Liang Mansion, he was afraid that he would quickly explain, I don't mean to disagree at all. I have no objection at all really. Chapter 339. Qin Xiao received Great Elder Princess Ronghua and Grand Tutor Liang in the palace. Great Elder Princess Ronghua didn't talk nonsense and directly repeated what Qin Yuanzheng had said. After that, she knelt in front of the emperor and said, I can't bear to see my granddaughter being humiliated like this. I beg you to take back the order. Emperor Xianda quickly helped her up. He said gently, Don't worry, Grandaunt. I watched my junior sister grow up. I can't watch her fall into the fire pit. Don't worry, we have already sent people to investigate. If it is really as little junior sister said, that Qin Yuanzheng is not a good match, then it can be considered that we pulled the strings of marriage back then. We will naturally give Grandaunt and cousin an explanation. Even Great Elder Princess Ronghua didn't expect that the emperor, who was young but resolute, would be so easygoing. The emperor's subordinates were naturally efficient. The Liang family didn't even wait for a long time before they received the emperor's news. The thing between Qin Yuanzheng and Zhang Mingshu was true. The emperor said to Great Elder Princess Ronghua, It's not difficult for me to issue an edict to abolish the previous imperial edict. But in this way, no matter what reason you find, your junior sister's reputation will be ruined. Great Elder Princess Ronghua fell silent. This was indeed the problem that they had been avoiding before. Even if it was said that Qin Yuanzheng, the heir of North Prince, was not virtuous, Liang Qinyu was a girl who had broken off the engagement. Those truly top-notch noble families would probably not be too willing to have their children marry such a person as their first wife. No matter what, even if my reputation is damaged, I don't want my or to marry someone like the heir of North Prince. Great Elder Princess Ronghua gritted her teeth. Here comes Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager, who had been staying in the Peaceful Life Palace, came to the Heavenly Dragon Palace for some reason. I've heard about what happened to your young lady. The Empress Dowager went straight to the point. Now, are you worried about how to solve this problem? I have an idea. Empress Dowager said slowly. Great Elder Princess Ronghua's eyes lit up. Please tell me, Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager smiled meaningfully. Liang Qinyu, the daughter of Liang Qinyu, has a precious life. The heir of North Prince can't afford it. As soon as she said this, the entire hall fell silent. It only took Grand Tutor Liang a second to realize what the Empress Dowager meant. If even the prince and heir could not bear the fate, then it could only be. He glanced at the emperor who was sitting at the head of the table, and found that there was no expression on the emperor's face. Great Elder Princess Ronghua also understood the meaning of the Empress Dowager's words. Was the Empress Dowager asking for Er's hand in marriage for His Majesty? Seeing that no one from the Liang residence spoke, the Empress Dowager raised her eyelids. What? Do you all have objections to my suggestion? Grand Tutor Liang loved his daughter after all. He didn't want his daughter to enter the harem where people were eaten, replying to the Empress Dowager, My daughter is naughty and mischievous, I'm afraid it's hard. The Empress Dowager gently placed the cup in her hand on the table and interrupted Grand Tutor Liang's words. The daughter of the Liang family is a model for the kingdom of Qi. Grand Tutor Liang is so modest. Could it be that you look down on the royal family? Grand Tutor Liang's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Even if he was given 100 guts, he would never dare to say such words. At this moment, he only hoped that His Majesty, who was sitting at the head of the table, could stand out and say something. Wasn't he extremely resistant when it came to the wedding? Why didn't he say anything today? Was it because the Empress Dowager was so dignified? Even His Majesty didn't dare to say more? Chapter 340. How could Grand Tutor Liang know that His Majesty the Emperor, who was hoping to stop the Empress Dowager, was already overjoyed in his heart? He was just putting on an act in front of them. In the end, under the Empress Dowager's aggressive attitude, and His Majesty pretended to be deaf and mute, this matter was settled like this. Watching the people of the Liang residence leave, the Empress Dowager, who had a dignified and unapproachable expression just now, changed her expression. You little rascal, you let Ijia be the bad guy for you. You're good, sitting here and waiting to embrace the beauty? The Empress Dowager no longer had her previous imposing manner, and glared at Qin Xiao in annoyance. Qin Xiao smiled very comfortably at this time. He looked at the Empress Dowager fawningly. That's why Imperial Mother loves Aken the most. The Empress Dowager was amused by his appearance. All right, I won't say more with you. This time, you chose the person yourself. You have to obediently marry me and let Aijiao embrace the little imperial grandson as soon as possible. After saying this, she frowned. That little girl of the Liang family is indeed a little young. We still have to wait for a year. Qin Xiao also frowned when he heard this. He was eager to get married immediately and announce his ownership to the world, telling everyone that his little junior sister was his empress. Grand Tutor Liang and the others had just entered the residence when the imperial decree from the palace arrived. By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees, Grand Tutor Liang's daughter, Liang Shi. It was voluminous, and the content was that a master had calculated the fate of Grand Tutor Liang's daughter, and found that she was born with an indescribably precious fate. The North Vanquishing Prince's heir was unlucky, and might not be able to bear it. His Majesty couldn't bear to see an accident happen, and specially decreed to annul the engagement between the two families. The people of the Liang residence received the decree jubilantly, but the people of the North Vanquishing Prince's residence were dumbfounded. The old Wang Fei also faintly heard about the autumn hunt, and hurriedly called her grandson over to ask what had happened. However, Qin Yuanjing was also at a loss. Grandson really doesn't know what happened. That Liang family's young miss fainted when she saw me. But soon they knew what had happened. Someone from the palace came and sent a thick stack of information to the North Vanquishing Prince's residence. Qin Yuanzheng looked at the things on the screen. They were all about him and his cousin. Some of the private conversations between them were actually recorded clearly by someone. Needless to say, he also knew that the Liang family's young miss that he had an engagement with her before was actually the young miss of the Liang residence. He had even told her what he was thinking and had even said in front of her, "I only love my cousin in this life." No wonder the Liang family's young miss couldn't take the blow and fainted after knowing his identity. She pointed at Qin Yuanzheng with a trembling hand. "I told you to send Zhang Mingshu away early on, but you didn't listen. She's already been kicked out of the mansion, but you still can't forget her? You's not worthy. It's obvious that the Liang family knew about this and specially went to ask for an imperial edict. That's not right. Fate is indescribably noble. Could it be?" Old Madam thought of a certain possibility and gasped. The future of the Prince of Wood residence, Wood Prince was in the future coming days. The old North Vanquishing Prince's wife was already old. After this shock, she fainted directly. "Grandmother." Qin Yuanzheng panicked and hurriedly sent his confidant to call the imperial physician over. The North Vanquishing Prince's residence's stabilizing force, the old Wang Fei Lu Shi, had a stroke. Chapter 341. North Vanquishing Prince was a playboy. He was obsessed with beauties and didn't want to make progress. North Vanquishing Princess was ignorant. She was a noble lady, But her knowledge was even worse than that of a daughter from a small family. The old North Vanquishing Princess had always put the hope of revitalizing North Vanquishing Prince's mansion on her grandson. Unfortunately, her grandson fell in the hands of a woman. If it was as she guessed, the royal family had that idea, the old North Vanquishing Princess was very anxious. She wanted to tell her son and grandson to go to the Liang's mansion to apologize now. Maybe there was still room for negotiation. Unfortunately, she only had 2 maids by her side now. Princess Jinbei had been oppressed by her all her life and had secretly hated her for many years. Now seeing her with a crooked face and drooling face, Princess Jinbei was so disgusted that she couldn't even greet Princess Jinbei properly, let alone take care of her. Therefore, when the imperial edict was issued, North Vanquishing Prince's mansion didn't do anything extra except to accept the edict and express their gratitude. However, many nobles in the capital city who had sharp ears and eyes went to the Grand Tutor's mansion more frequently after learning about this. When Great Elder Princess Ronghua and others returned to the mansion, they looked at each other and didn't know how to mention this matter to Gu Xingyin. Originally, they entered the palace to dissolve the marriage for her. However, the marriage was dissolved, but they were involved in another bigger marriage. Grand Tutor Liang stroked his beard and said, "I remember that there are still many things to deal with in the study. I'll leave first." Great Elder Princess Ronghua looked at her son helplessly, shook her head and said, "Well, it's inappropriate for him to talk about a girl's marriage in person, even as a father." She turned to Madame Meng and said, "Come with me to Yuer's place." When they came to Gu Xingyin's yard, Gu Xingyin had already woken up and waited for a long time. Seeing her grandmother and mother coming, she hurried forward and asked anxiously, "How's it going?" Looking at her daughter's expectant eyes, Madame Meng smiled and said, "The marriage between our family and North Vanquishing Prince's mansion is dissolved." Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Madame Meng's heart skipped a beat when she saw her daughter's expression. She continued, I have something to tell you." Gu Xingyin looked at her mother curiously. Mrs. Meng glanced at Great Elder Princess and found that she didn't intend to speak, so she had to say, His Majesty and Empress Dowager in the Imperial Palace were very angry when they learned about what happened in North Jinbei's mansion. In addition to dissolving the engagement between the 2 families, Empress Dowager also issued another decree. Gu Xingyin looked at her in confusion. Madame Meng took a deep breath and said, "The Empress Dowager wants to find a beautiful wife for His Majesty, and the Empress Dowager's choice is you." Seeing her daughter's bewildered look, the Meng family dropped another bombshell. His Majesty did not object. This meant that this matter was already set in stone. Gu Xingyin was indeed shocked, but what shocked her was, "System, his actions are much faster than I thought." She had just come into contact with the scumbag, and the palace couldn't wait to express their intention to marry her. So it was just the Empress Dowager's idea? Gu Xingyin didn't believe a word of it. Seeing her granddaughter's silence, Great Elder Princess Ronghua thought that she couldn't accept it. So she said in a low voice, "The Empress Dowager wants to marry you as the Empress for His Majesty. For our family, this is a great grace." Whether Gu Xingyin was willing or not, she had to accept it. Chapter 342. Great Elder Princess and Madame Meng left, leaving Gu Xingyin enough time to figure it out. In fact, in their hearts, this matter was not unacceptable. In the imperial court, no matter which family it was, it must be jubilant to have an empress. The imperial edict came quickly, and together with the imperial edict, it was the reward from the Empress Dowager. On the way from the imperial palace to the Grand Tutor's mansion, the things carried into the Grand Tutor's mansion like running water made people on the roadside speechless. Even Lady Meng was surprised. Don't tell me they emptied the treasury?" Great Elder Princess smiled. They all knew that whether the imperial reward was generous or not, it directly showed how satisfied the emperor was with you. Moreover, it was impossible for such a large reward to be given without the emperor's permission. It meant that the emperor was also satisfied with you. In this way, Great Elder Princess felt much better. The North Prince's mansion did not expect this development at all. When Qin Yuanzheng heard the news, he felt a little lost in his heart. He thought of the girl he met at the Pine Forest Inn. Her clear eyes seemed to be able to see into one's heart. He also thought of the girl in the autumn hunting enclosure. She was dressed in fiery red, her eyebrows flying. She was dazzling. She should have been his wife, but what? There were some things that he didn't know in his heart. The North Prince's mansion also received an imperial edict. His Majesty granted a marriage between Qin Yuanzheng and Zhang Mingxiu. Qin Yuanzheng originally thought that he would be ecstatic, but the moment he received the imperial edict, he found that he was not as happy as he imagined. He even felt a little confused. Wasn't this what he had been pursuing all the time? In the whole North Prince's mansion, the happiest person about this imperial edict was Princess Jinbei. She had always hoped that her son could marry a daughter-in-law who was close to her and obedient. As her niece, Zhang Mingxiu was undoubtedly an excellent choice. Soon, Zhang Mingxiu was taken back to the mansion by Princess Jinbei. When she learned about the imperial edict, she thought that it was her cousin who asked His Majesty for the imperial edict, so she was more devoted to Qin Yuanzheng for a while. Cousin. The girl in front of him had bright eyes. Her eyebrows were like a painting, and her entire heart was filled with him. This was the woman he liked the most, the wife he had always wanted to marry. Qin Yuanzheng told himself. He calmed himself down and revealed a gentle smile to Zhang Mingxiu. Gu Xingyin was detained at home by great elder Princess Ronghua. The etiquette and upbringing of the Liang residence was naturally first class, but if the granddaughter was going to enter the imperial palace, then it was still somewhat lacking. Gu Xingyin began to learn all kinds of etiquette every day. Fortunately, she had some foundation from the previous world. The education that this body had received since young was also top-notch, so it was not difficult for her to learn. Even the etiquette instructors from the palace had to secretly praise the future empress for her impeccable etiquette and posture. The only downside was that she could no longer go out as she pleased. However, even though she couldn't go out, the one who suffered the most was not Gu Xingyin, but a certain emperor deep in the palace. Could it be that he would not be able to see junior sister for nearly a year? Qin Xiao felt that he couldn't bear it. Therefore, under the instruction of the Empress Dowager, the nobles of the state of Qi began to hold all kinds of banquets. Of course, the Liang residents would receive invitations to the flower-admiring banquet, poetry recital of the young ladies, birthday banquets, and so on. Chapter 343. For the third time, Gu Xingyin encountered Xian the Emperor in the garden of the founding duke's house. Was the emperor so idle? After these two encounters, Gu Xingyin completely understood her lover's thoughts. Chen Nu greets. She moved to make a bow. Qin Xiao hurriedly stopped her. Little Shimmy doesn't have to be so courteous. You and I will soon. He stopped speaking and swallowed the word marriage that he had been about to say. Little Shimmy was definitely very shy. What if she ran away? People said that they would become dumb in front of their sweetheart. It was clear that the wise His Majesty the Emperor was not an exception. He forgot that if Gu Xingyin was really shy and wanted to avoid suspicion, she would have found an excuse to leave when the two met. Even though Gu Xingyin did not mind immediately sharing her feelings with her lover, Liang Qinyu clearly was not familiar with the Emperor, much less deeply in love. Gu Xingyin spoke. Your Majesty, you and I already have. It is best to avoid suspicion in front of others. What had to be said had to be said. Qin Xiao's mind turned quickly. Little Shimmy also said that it is in front of others. Right now there is no one in the garden. We can be considered to be in private? Gu Xingyin. Qin Xiao looked at his little Shimmy's stunned expression and felt it was extremely cute. He felt that he needed to express his feelings to his little Shimmy. He thought and decided to speak frankly. Zhen has admired Shimmy for a long time. Marrying you as the empress was not Muhu's idea, but Zhen's. The young emperor was handsome and elegant. He looked at the girl whose head just reached his shoulders, and the emotion brewing in his eyes was enough to make people drown. There were not many women in the world who could resist the temptation of being stared at so deeply by the emperor of the world. Gu Xingyin blushed naturally. This time, she didn't even care about etiquette, covering her face and running away. Qin Xiao was left standing there alone. Looking at her back, he smiled. As expected, no matter what little Shimmy looked like, she was so beautiful. When Gu Xingyin came to the front, Her face was still a little red. Madame Ming saw her, but didn't say much. She was not stupid. Qin Xiao had come again and again. Madame Ming already knew who her daughter was going to see. Although she muttered that it was against etiquette, Madame Ming was actually very happy. He knew his daughter well. At most, the two of them would just meet face to face. It was impossible for them to do anything impolite. His Majesty had spent so much effort to see his daughter. What did that mean? This meant that he had his daughter in his heart. Madame Ming suddenly recalled how she had secretly met with Grand Tutor Liang when she was young. At that time, the marriage between the two of them had already been set, and they were both in love with each other. They secretly met each other once, and even if they didn't say anything and just sat opposite each other, they still felt extremely satisfied. Although His Majesty was older than the others in the Great Fog, she had never heard of him liking any noble lady. Presumably, he was full of longing and love for his future wife. Therefore, the feelings between Xian the Emperor and his future Empress grew deeper as they met. North Shenhuang Shixi and her Biao Mei were already preparing to marry. The date of the marriage decree from the palace had been set in a hurry. There was only a month between the marriage decree and the auspicious date. What could be done in a month's time? For a family like North Shenhuang Fu, even if it was a seashore, there were many things to pay attention to, much less a proper Shixi Fei. But there wasn't enough time. What could be simplified could only be simplified. This way, the dignity of the new Shixi Fei would naturally drop a level. Chapter 344. Zhang Mingxu didn't have any relatives, so her marriage was completely arranged by Prince Xinbei's mansion. Princess Xinbei actually built a courtyard outside, and let Zhang Mingxu live in it. When the wedding day came, Zhang Mingxu could marry into the mansion from there. Those who didn't know would think that the Prince Xinbei's mansion was very dissatisfied with this princess. In fact, Zhang Mingxu's situation had happened before. If he really valued this daughter-in-law, he would naturally choose a suitable family and treat her as his adopted daughter. In this way, the girl would have a status and wouldn't be so awkward that she didn't even have a mother when she got married. Seeing Zhang Mingxu's treatment, the servants of Prince Xinbei's mansion didn't say anything, but they more or less disapproved of this new princess. In fact, Prince Xinbei's mansion didn't mean to look down on Zhang Mingxu. It was just that the old princess had always been in charge of the Prince Xinbei's mansion. All these years, she only knew how to appreciate flowers and jade, and listen to operas with her acquaintances. She didn't care about these worldly things at all. Originally, the old princess had given up on her, and interrupted her plan to find a reliable princess for her. She gave up the Prince Xinbei's mansion to her granddaughter-in-law. Who would have thought that the marriage that she had high hopes for would be ruined, and the old Wang Fei would fall ill because of it? Everything fell on the Wang Fei, who only knew how to watch the show. She was already in a terrible fix and her life was so tight. It was easy to imagine how chaotic the Prince Xinbei's mansion was. Many guests treated it as a joke. And Zhang Mingxu, who entered the Prince Xinbei's mansion in such a situation, was subconsciously inferior in the eyes of others. But Zhang Mingxu was raised by Prince Xinbei's mansion since she was a child. How much experience could she have? But she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Qin Yuanzheng was getting more and more upset. In the past, when he was engaged, this cousin of his was the best in his heart. However, less than a month after their marriage, he found that his cousin was far from what he had imagined. Zhang Mingxu was simply another Prince Xinbei's mansion. She wasn't a common woman. The Prince Xinbei's mansion was in a mess because of her, and the servants were all sneaky. Her appearance could be considered to be the type that was gorgeous, but she liked to put on a delicate and touching appearance. In the past, Qin Yuanzheng felt that his cousin had a special charm like this. But he married her as his legal wife, which family's first wife would frown every day with a pitiful look on her face. Why did the legal wife learn to act like a concubine? Every time there was a banquet in the Prince Xinbei's mansion, the madams with a little status wouldn't bother to pay attention to Zhang Mingxu. Zhang Mingxu's mansion. Qin Yuanzheng sometimes wondered why he liked his cousin so much all these years as mansions Qin's heart's mansion was Qin's Tites Qin. To the more he thought Qin Yuanzheng's. He didn't like Gu Xingyin that much. It was just that when Zhang Mingxu did something that disappointed him, he would unconsciously compare her with Gu Xingyin. If it was Miss Liang, she wouldn't be like this, right? The Liang mansion's education was the model of the whole kingdom of Qi. Liang Chenyu could be the mother of the kingdom. It was a piece of cake for her to take care of a small Prince Zhenbei's mansion. The daughter of the Liang mansion was always popular at banquets. It was impossible for her to be like his cousin, who came back with a sad face every time she attended a banquet. Zhang Mingxu naturally noticed the change in attitude of the person sleeping next to her. There was a crack in the sweet relationship between the two of them. Chapter 345. Gu Xingyin had been paying attention to the situation between Zhang Mingxu and Qin Yuanzheng. She saw that the relationship between Zhang Mingxu and Qin Yuanzheng was no longer as strong as before. She saw that Zhang Mingxu was not familiar with public affairs. She saw that the large family of Zhenbei Wangfu had become a joke in the eyes of others. At first, Zhang Mingxu still had Wang Fei's favor. But as Qin Xiao found a reason to take down Zhenbei Wangfu, and there was no one in the Fu to turn to for help, Wang Fei realized how important it was for a noble family like them to have a reliable in-law who could speak in the court. In addition, Zhang Mingxu and her son were not on good terms. As a mother, no matter how much she liked Zhang Mingxu, her heart was naturally biased towards her son. In this way, Zhang Mingxu gradually lost favor in front of Wang Fei. His official career was not smooth, and Qin Yuanzheng, who was more and more disappointed in her, started to hang out with women outside. When the first concubine entered the door, a fierce quarrel broke out between Zhang Mingxu and Qin Yuanzheng. Zhang Mingxu felt that her cousin had changed. He said that he would be devoted to her, but now he wanted to take another woman in. She completely forgot that when Qin Yuanzheng and Gu Xingyin were still engaged, she also had the same idea. Everyone knew that the princess consort who had just entered Zhenbei Wangfu for less than half a year was not favored in the Fu. She who had no family could only rely on her husband's family. If she was not favored in her husband's family, then she was really nothing. Gu Xingyin soon had no time to pay attention to the two of them, because she was about to get married. The emperor's wedding was naturally first-class luxurious, and also first-class cumbersome. Even if Gu Xingyin had experienced it once, she still felt that it was really tiring to go through it like this. Welcoming the bride, worshipping the ancestral temple, kowtowing to heaven and earth, entering Kurani Palace, followed by the big banquet. When everything was over, Gu Xingyin was so tired that she did not want to move a finger. Unfortunately, there was also the wedding wine and the wedding night. Because of the happiness in his heart, the emperor who drank a lot of wine almost couldn't wait to lift his wife's veil. Yes, wife. Qin Xiao gently pondered these two words between his lips and teeth, feeling extremely comfortable in his heart. He looked at the little woman under the red candlelight. The luxurious and elegant empress gown vividly displayed her incomparable beauty. At this moment, her head was slightly lowered, as if she was a little shy. Her long and curly eyelashes trembled slightly, causing the emperor's heart to tremble as well. The wedding room was filled with red, and the woman he loved the most was on the wedding bed. Qin Xiao only felt that the wine he drank before seemed to be even more intoxicating. The necessary procedures were all completed. Qin Xiao waved his hand to let all the extra people leave. He slowly walked towards his wife and bent down to pick her up. From now on, she belongs to me, he thought sweetly and proudly. The night was red and the wind was blowing. The wedding candles in the palace of Kuan-Yi burned until dawn. Everyone in the palace knew that the empress was favored. Since the day of the wedding, His Majesty had stayed in the palace of Kuan-Yi with the empress every night. His Majesty, in addition to dealing with the affairs of the court every day, also had free time. Right now there were no other concubines in the palace. The emperor had just gotten married, and there were no officials who didn't have eyes to mention the matter of taking in concubines at this time. Gu Xingyin's days were very comfortable. The Empress Dowager was also very kind, but every time Gu Xingyin went to pay respects, the Empress Dowager would stare at her stomach and smile meaningfully. Chapter 346. On the winter solstice, Her Majesty the Empress held a banquet in the palace. This was the first time Her Majesty the Empress held a banquet by herself after the wedding of the Emperor and Empress, so the significance was naturally extraordinary. All the women with official titles wore court robes that symbolized their status and dressed themselves up properly, striving to leave a good impression on the young empress. Zhang Mingxu was no exception. She sat in her seat and heard the eunuch's shrill voice shout, "Her Majesty the Empress has arrived." She knelt down and didn't dare to raise her head. Only when the high and mighty person sat down at the head seat did she stand up with everyone else. Zhang Mingxu was very curious about this empress. The Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter was originally going to be the heir consort of the North vanquishing prince estate. But now, she had become the empress who was the mother of the world, and she had replaced her original position. She also noticed that many people were intentionally or unintentionally sizing her up. Many people were also sizing up the empress's attitude towards this North vanquishing prince's heir consort. Unfortunately, many people were disappointed. Gu Xingyin acted as if she didn't know about this from beginning to end, and didn't even give Zhang Mingxu a glance. But Zhang Mingxu finally couldn't hold back and looked towards the head seat. With this look, she was so shocked that she knocked over the wine cup in her hand, and the canyi in the cup stained her skirt. Immediately, many people snickered and secretly despised this North vanquishing prince's heir consort for not knowing etiquette. But Zhang Mingxu didn't have the time to pay attention to this. This Her Majesty the Empress was clearly Big Sister Meng. Then the words she said to her in the past. Zhang Mingxu broke out in a cold sweat because of her own shock. At that time, she was still Cousin's fiancée, but she actually said in front of her that she and Cousin were deeply in love, and even cursed her for being vicious. At this moment, Zhang Mingxu only wished she could shrink into the ground so that the person at the head seat couldn't see her. Unfortunately, Gu Xingyin had been paying attention to her. Zhang Mingxu only saw the person at the head seat say something, and then a female official walked towards her. She was very scared that the Empress would punish her. So she got up and knelt down before the female official walked over and spoke. "I'm guilty." She heard a burst of snickering around her. The female official seemed to be frightened and said in shock, "Shi Fei, please rise. I am following the Empress' orders to take you to a quiet room to change." Zhang Mingxu was embarrassed for a moment. She followed the female official into the quiet room. The female official excused herself to get clean clothes. She waited for a long time until she heard footsteps behind her. As soon as she turned her head, she saw the person she didn't want to see the most. "Sister Meng, how dare you?" Jian Jia, who was now the chief palace maid of the Palace of Manners, had gradually honed her aura. "You don't salute when you see Her Highness?" Zhang Mingxu hurriedly knelt down and begged Gu Xingyin for mercy. "Your Majesty, please have mercy on me. I didn't know it was you at that time. Please take it that I was speaking nonsense when I was sick." She also knew that if Gu Xingyin wanted to punish her, it was just a matter of a word. Gu Xingyin looked at Zhang Mingxu, who was trembling in fear and had no manners at all. She really felt sorry for Liang Qinyu. She actually lost to a woman like this? What is Shi Fei saying? I don't understand a single word. I only came to take a look because Shi Fei didn't come out after seeing her. Could it be that Shi Fei drank too much and spoke nonsense? Chapter 347. Zhang Mingxu saw that Gu Xingyin pretended not to know her, and secretly let out a sigh of relief. She thought that the Empress was not going to pursue her. Unfortunately, she was happy too early. The next day after returning, the northern Wang Fu received 2 mamas from the palace, saying that the etiquette of the Shitzi consort still needed to be improved. In fact, Gu Xingyin did not ask the 2 mamas to do anything. She knew Zhang Mingxu's personality. Even if she did not do anything, she would be scared to death. Sure enough, Zhang Mingxu started to feel uneasy day and night. She always felt that the 2 mamas had bad intentions. They must have been sent by the Empress to persecute her. She started to not be able to sleep peacefully. The consequence of not resting well was that Zhang Mingxu became hysterical and irritable. Qin Yuanzheng, who had already started a relationship with her, naturally could not stand her. In particular, Qin Yuanzheng was not liked by Qin Xiao. He had nothing left except for an empty title. He was very upset and simply moved out of the Zhenyuan. But the biggest blow to Zhang Mingshu was that one day after eating, she had a dull pain in her lower abdomen after eating. When the doctor came, her lower body was already bleeding. Because her mind was unstable and she did not eat or drink these days, her body was very weak. She was originally 2 months pregnant, and her body was injured this time. It would be difficult for her to have children in the future. This was the biggest blow to a woman. Zhang Mingshu's temperament changed greatly, and she cursed day and night. Qin Yuanzheng, who had taken pity on her because of her miscarriage, quickly could not stand her. Under the Northern Wang Fei's decision, he took 2 charming concubines. Zhang Mingshu's life was over. Qin Yuanzheng was not much better. The nobles who were not liked by the emperor had no other income except for the salary. Originally, there were many shops and fields outside the mansion. Unfortunately, the North Jinbei mansion didn't know how to take care of them, and let their servants slack off. Unfortunately, the North Jinbei mansion was a family that spent money like water. The entire northern Wang Fu declined at a terrifying speed. At this point, there was no more Gu Xingyin. She was very precious now. There was no other reason. Not long ago, she was diagnosed to be more than a month pregnant. The Empress Dowager was overjoyed. She had been looking forward to this day for many years. She did not expect that only 2 months after the Empress's wedding, there would be good news. The rewards from the Peaceful Life Palace had never stopped since they received the news. There was no need to mention Qin Xiao. Ever since he learned that Gu Xingyin was pregnant, he hated that he couldn't stay by the Empress' side 24 hours a day. As for some of the officials in the court who didn't blink their eyes and said, His Majesty should expand the harem and expand the royal family, after he removed them from their official posts, no one dared to mention it again. These people did not give up, and went to find the Empress Dowager, hoping that she could persuade His Majesty. The Empress Dowager's mind was on the Empress belly. Of course, she was not happy to hear this kind of talk. She directly said, If everyone is too idle, Ijia can report to His Majesty. The attitude of His Majesty and the Empress Dowager made everyone understand the status of the Empress in the palace. Gu Xingyin only cared about taking care of the fetus. When the 10th month was up, the melon would fall when it was ripe. When the first ray of dawn broke through the darkness, the Empress gave birth to a pair of twins in Kuani Palace. The 2 palaces were overjoyed and pardoned the world. Xianda Emperor had been on the throne for 30 years, and had 3 sons and 1 daughter with the Empress. Xianda had been the eldest son for 30 years and traveled the country of Qi with the Empress. This pair of emperors and empresses who were famous in history left the world with endless imagination. The deep love that no one had ever entered between them became a legend that countless people envied. Chapter 348. Gu Xingyin didn't want to stay in that pure white space where only the system existed. System, start transferring to the next world. She said. Okay. The system had never seen a host who couldn't wait to do a task. When Gu Xingyin opened her eyes this time, she found herself sitting in front of a large office desk. The computer screen in front of her was filled with dense data tables. It was obvious that this was an office, and she was the only one in the office. The system and Gu Xingyin already had a tacit understanding. Almost at the same time, the entire world's plot was transferred to Gu Xingyin's mind. The original owner, Long Tianrua, was a celebrity on the list of the richest people in a city, and also the CEO of the Long's family business. This young CEO, who was no more than 24 years old, was a well-known figure in the upper-class circle of a city. She was the only descendant of the Long's generation, and also the head of the Long's group. Long Tianrua returned from studying abroad 4 years ago, and entered the family business. At that time, the head of the Long's father, suddenly passed away. The entire Long's had no leader, and was drifting in the wind and rain. Long Tianrua took over the Long's in such a situation. Everyone was waiting to see her make a fool of herself. No one believed that a girl who was no more than 20 years old could achieve anything. Those competitors were even gloating over her misfortune, thinking that from now on, there would be one less person to take a share of the pie. However, Long Tianrua used her strength to prove what it meant to not bully a poor youth. The Long's was successfully revived in her hands, and after that, it became one of the giants in a city's business world. Long Tianrua herself also became a role model for the rich second generation of a city. Logically speaking, a woman like Long Tianrua should be able to make a name for herself wherever she went, and should be a winner in life wherever she lived. Unfortunately, she met her destined calamity, Wang Zhenjin. Wang Zhenjin was a person who didn't stand out at all. At most, she could only be considered a pretty face. She had a second-rate education and mediocre abilities. Her parents were also ordinary employees. After Wang Zhenjin graduated, she entered the Longs and became an ordinary clerk. However, her job didn't last long. The Longs didn't need ordinary employees in all aspects, so she was fired in the end. It seemed that Wang Zhenjin and Long Tianrua had nothing to do with each other. However, the day before Wang Zhenjin was fired, she was playing a game when Long Tianrua happened to pass by and saw her. Long Tianrua casually scolded her. In fact, Long Tianrua was just saying that casually. She didn't even know who Wang Zhenjin was. However, when Wang Zhenjin received her dismissal notice the next day, she thought it was Long Tianrua's doing and blamed her for it. If that was all, then Long Tianrua and Wang Zhenjin wouldn't have any deep grudges. The key point was that Wang Zhenjin, who had become unemployed, saved a man covered in blood in a dark alley one day. That man was the one who had caused Long Tianrua's tragic end, Xia Ziqing. There was no one in a city who didn't know about the Xia family. They were the emperors of a city's underground kingdom. Although Xia Ziqing was only a young master from a side branch of the Xia family, he still had a lot of power. Xia Ziqing became interested in Wang Zhenjin. The two of them had all kinds of love and hate, and after torturing each other, they lived happily together. During that time, there was a huge obstacle between the two of them, and that was Long Tianrua. Long Tianrua was Xia Ziqing's first love, and the first woman he had ever dated and even planned to marry. However, the two of them had broken up a year ago. Xia Ziqing was too flirtatious, and Long Tianrua couldn't accept that her boyfriend was entangled with another woman. Chapter 349. Long Tianrua's existence became a thorn in Wang Zhenjin's heart as Xia Ziqing and Wang Zhenjin broke up countless times. She hated Long Tianrua. After she got together with Xia Ziqing, she secretly bribed someone to do something to Long Tianrua's car. In the end, Long Tianrua lost control of the car on the viaduct and died. Gu Xingyin saw the end of the plot. She rubbed her eyebrows and remembered that Wang Zhenjin was a person that even a stray dog would feel pity for. She didn't expect that in the end. She could even kill someone without batting an eyelid. Sure enough, a human's mind was the most complicated thing to understand. Knock, knock, knock. Someone knocked on the door. Come in, Gu Xingyin said in a low voice as she sat on the office chair. Long Tianrua's chief executive assistant, Julie, came in with a thick stack of documents. President, this is the quarterly proposal of each department. Please take a look. Julie put the documents on the table and couldn't help but look at Gu Xingyin. However, this boss with an extremely hot body had a cold face. Her eyebrows were not as soft as an ordinary woman's. Instead, they were slightly raised. Coupled with her slightly raised phoenix eyes, her entire person exuded a fierce aura. Feeling her assistant's gaze, Gu Xingyin glanced over and smiled. Is there any other problem? No. Julie couldn't control her wildly beating heart and quickly replied, President, I'll take my leave first. Julie, who was walking out of the door, gently patted her hot face with her hand. She thought of the president's gaze just now. Stop. She had a boyfriend. But how could the president be so handsome? Julie secretly fantasized. If such a president confessed to her, would she be able to firmly reject him? Forget it. This problem could be discussed later. Gu Xingyin didn't know how much her assistant had racked her brain in just a few minutes. At this moment, she was thinking about how to deal with the mission target in this world. Wang Zhenjin was still working in the Long Corporation, but she was about to be fired. However, Wang Zhenjin's departure from the Dragon Corporation was only a small matter compared to the overall plot. The key was still Xia Ziqing. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment, and realized that there were only two ways to stop everything from developing. One was to find a way to stop Xia Ziqing and Wang Zhenjin's first encounter, which was Wang Zhenjin's life-saving grace to Xia Ziqing. The other was to make Xia Ziqing fall head over heels for her. Gu Xingyin didn't really like the second method. After all, if Xia Ziqing wasn't her lover, she couldn't convince herself to pretend to be in love with another man. Then, he would make sure that the two of them would never have the chance to meet. Gu Xingyin immediately made the decision. Wang Zhenjin was about to pack up and get off work. She was very satisfied with her current job. The Long Corporation treated its employees very well, and her salary was much higher than that of the same industry. When she first learned that she had been hired by the Long Corporation, she was in disbelief. As she walked out and got off the elevator, she found that the VIP elevator next to her had also reached the first floor. There weren't many people in the company who could use the VIP channel. Wang Zhenjin looked over curiously. Chapter 350. Ding, the elevator door opened. The first thing that entered Wang Zhenjin's eyes was a pair of well-proportioned, long legs. Then Wang Zhenjin saw the owner of those long legs. "She's so tall," was Wang Zhenjin's first thought. She was 1.6 meters tall, but the person in front of her was a head taller than her. Gu Xingyin glanced at Wang Zhenjin, who was standing at the side, then turned around and walked towards the parking lot without any hesitation. Wang Zhenjin waited until she was far away, before she came back to her senses. That glance just now made her feel like she had been seen through. She knew who this person was. She was on the financial news, and in some of the publications printed by the company. The big boss of the Long Corporation. A top figure that she would never be able to meet in her life. Wang Zhenjin shook her head, and walked towards the bus stop outside the company. Gu Xingyin sat in the car, and remembered that she had seen Wang Zhenjin just now. She was indeed a person who didn't seem to have any presence. It was hard to imagine that such a person would actually hire a killer in the end. Long Tianruo's life was very self-disciplined. Apart from work, she never went to places like nightclubs or bars. She usually worked out and practiced yoga in her spare time, and occasionally went to a concert or two to get together with a few close friends. With her status, the only people who could interact with her were only a few people in that small circle. "Sister, are you free tonight? Brother Lin came back last night. Let's meet up." The person who called was Long Tianruo's childhood friend, Zhu Xiaoxiao, who grew up with her. This girl was different from Long Tianruo. She was spoiled by the elders at home, and her brothers took care of everything at home. She was really a little princess. However, this little princess was charmed by Long Tianruo's looks at first sight when she was young. She said that she wanted to marry her, which made the two families laugh for a long time. Later, Zhu Xiaoxiao understood the difference between men and women. Although she no longer said that she wanted to marry Long Tianruo, she became her #1 fangirl. In her eyes, Long Tianruo was the best down to a strand of hair. Even her own brother had to stand aside. Long Tianruo was very close to her. She didn't have any siblings, so she treated Zhu Xiaoxiao as her own sister. Since Zhu Xiaoxiao had spoken, she naturally wouldn't refuse. At night, Gu Xingyin opened Long Tianruo's wardrobe. Suddenly, she saw all kinds of custom-made suits. Gu Xingyin. She opened another wardrobe, picked out a less formal outfit and put it on. Then she drove to the destination that Zhu Xiaoxiao mentioned. This was a famous entertainment street in City A. As long as you had the money, you could enjoy whatever you wanted to play on this street. When Gu Xingyin got out of the car, she attracted a lot of attention. When they saw her car, they knew that she was rich. Some people even whistled at her on the street. Of course, Gu Xingyin wouldn't bother with them. The place Zhu Xiaoxiao and the others chose was a high-end club. Gu Xingyin reported the address and walked in under the guidance of the waiter. She pushed the door open. It was bustling inside, and everyone looked at her when they saw her coming in. "Not bad, Tianruo. I give you full marks for today's outfit." A young man dressed like a punk standing closest to the door gave Gu Xingyin a thumbs up. The rest of the people also looked at her in surprise. They couldn't be blamed for making a fuss. Long Tianruo usually dressed like a professional. It was rare to see her in a different style today. It really made people's eyes light up. Chapter 351. Her knee-length, long-sleeved windbreaker perfectly displayed her slender figure. She was wearing a white blouse, tight leather pants, and a pair of British Martin boots. Her long hair, which was usually neatly coiled, was let down, adding a unique feminine beauty to her. If she had to be described, there was only one word to describe her: handsome. Zhu Xiaoxiao had already taken photos of her body from every angle with the sound of "Kacha, Kacha, Kacha." Gu Xingyin frowned slightly at this time. There was no other reason. In this room, there were a lot of people who came to the party today. Among them, there were several people who she didn't know. That was fine, but the key was that there were a few hostesses sitting inside. Whether it was Long Tianrua or Gu Xingyin, they didn't like this. Zhu Xiaoxiao could tell at a glance that she was in a bad mood. She whispered in her ear. It said that their brother Lin's friends from outside. He brought them here to play. I only found out after I came here. Gu Xingyin gently raised the corner of her lips and smiled faintly. I know. Don't worry, I don't mind. It was a pity that Lin Zhao's friends didn't know who Gu Xingyin was. When they saw Gu Xingyin, one of them was stunned. Lindsay, you are not kind. You have such beautiful friends. Why don't you introduce them to us? This was true, but when the man spoke, his eyes looked at Gu Xingyin unscrupulously. The meaning in his eyes made people very uncomfortable. Lin Xiao had a bad feeling in his heart. If Long Tian was someone who could sit at the negotiation table with his father and talk to his elders, his friends probably didn't know her and treated her as an ordinary rich family's young lady. He smiled and tried to smooth things over. Are you drunk? This is Long Jia, the head of Long Corporation. Didn't you say you've heard a lot about her before? That man might really be drunk. If he was sober, even if he didn't know who Long Tianrua was, he would probably know that Lin Xiao was warning him. Unfortunately, at this moment, his brain was invaded by alcohol, and only the beauty in front of him was left. He hugged the gentle young lady beside him and said with a smile, What Long family? I asked you to introduce this young lady. Why are you talking about this? Lin Xiao wished he could go back in time. He would never have brought this idiot here. Gu Xingyin's mouth twitched. Lindsay, the friends you brought this time are not of the same quality. She was blatantly mocking him, but Lin Xiao still had to smile apologetically. I'm sorry Long Jia, next time I'll keep my eyes open. It was embarrassing to bring such an idiot out. When the drunk man saw that no one was paying attention to him, he started to talk nonsense. What's wrong, Lindsay? Could it be that this beautiful lady is your lover? You can't bear to part with her, right? You should have said so earlier. Gu Xingyin looked on coldly without saying a word, wondering how Lin Xiao was going to deal with it. When Lin Xiao saw her attitude, he knew that she wanted to see what he should do. He gritted his teeth and called the waiter over. Sir, take him down and find a room to settle him down. Lin Xiao said. This also meant that the man had lost the right to leave and be with them. It was quiet in the room, especially Lin Zhao's friends from other places. They all sat up straight at this moment. Lin Xiao poured himself a glass of wine and raised his glass to Gu Xingyin. Long Jia, this time I didn't see the right person and ruined everyone's mood. Cheers. After speaking, he downed the glass in one gulp. Gu Xingyin finally revealed a smile. Chapter 352. She raised the glass in her hand, raised it to Lin Xiao, and drank it in one gulp. The atmosphere in the box suddenly warmed up, and everyone began to laugh and talk, as if what happened before was an illusion. Long Tianrua had a cold temper, and except for a few good friends, she was too lazy to talk to others. But she couldn't stand her beauty, and if she didn't talk to others, someone would talk to her. Gu Xingyin sat here patiently for an hour, and when she felt that it was enough, she got up and said goodbye to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao also knew that she had given him a lot of face by coming, so he didn't say much, and just said that he would send her out. Gu Xingyin refused his kindness to send her out, but Zhu Xiaoxiao followed her out with a smile. Why did you come out with me? Your brother will call and ask again later. Gu Xingyin looked at her helplessly. Zhu Xiaoxiao pouted. I don't like hanging out with them. I don't know what kind of people Bro Lindsay has met this time. All of them are so ignorant. It's fine if that's the case, but they all like to pretend. I'm so sick of them. Gu Xingyin listened to her long-winded words, and a smile unconsciously appeared on her lips. Tianru, Suddenly, a surprised voice came from behind. Zhu Xiaoxiao closed her mouth, and the smile on Gu Xingyin's lips disappeared in an instant. The man behind quickly caught up, and what made Gu Xingyin depressed was that this man was also wearing a knee-length trench coat today, and the style was similar to what she was wearing. People who didn't know would think that they were wearing a couple's outfit. This man was Long Tianruo's ex-boyfriend, Xia Ziqing, who Wang Zhenjin loved to death. Xia Ziqing did have enough capital to be liked by Long Tianruo, and to be able to make Wang Zhenjin fall in love with him. He was very handsome, the kind of textbook handsome, with handsome facial features, a hearty and infectious smile, a tall and straight figure, and enough conditions to package himself. Such a man had a strong attraction to every woman. I saw your figure from afar, so I rushed over. Tianruo, it's really you. Long time no see. Xia Ziqing gazed at Gu Xingyin with undisguised affection in his eyes. Gu Xingyin frowned. Xia Ziqing, what's the matter? Her cold reaction made Xia Ziqing's eyes dim. He looked down at Gu Xingyin and said in a low voice, Tianruo, I miss you very much. Before Gu Xingyin could say anything, Zhu Xiaoxiao, who was beside her, spoke up with a displeased expression. Xia Ziqing, how dare you say such things? Who was the man who was surrounded by women when he was with elder sister Tianruo? Who was the man who was photographed with another woman? Who was the one who provoked those indecent women who came knocking on his door? You really are. Although she had a wild temperament, her upbringing was very good, so she couldn't say anything that could hurt people. But even so, it was enough to make Xia Ziqing's face pale. Zhu Xiaoxiao looked at him and felt relieved. She had never liked Xia Ziqing. When Long Tianruo decided to date Xia Ziqing, she didn't like Xia Ziqing's reputation as a playboy. Moreover, Zhu Xiaoxiao didn't like the man who stole her most admired elder sister Tianruo's man. Finally, when she found out that Xia Ziqing had been playing around with other women when he was dating Long Tianruo, Zhu Xiaoxiao hated him even more. Chapter 353. Gu Xingyin didn't want to deal with this kind of person anymore. She took Zhu Xiaoxiao's hand and said, Xiaoxiao, it's not worth getting angry over this kind of person. Let's go. However, when she passed by Xia Ziqing, he suddenly grabbed her arm. Tianruo. Xia Ziqing looked at her with a sincere expression. I really like you and want to spend the rest of my life with you. Gu Xingyin shook off his hand. I'm sorry, Xia Ziqing. I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. I'll say it again. We've already broken up. If you continue to pester me, I won't be polite to you. She suddenly looked in a certain direction and said in a mocking tone, Xia Ziqing, look behind you. Someone is waiting for you to turn back. At the corner of the corridor stood a woman with exquisite makeup. Gu Xingyin didn't know her, so she must be one of Xia Ziqing's new lovers. This person was a tactful person. He just stood behind obediently and didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin thought that since she had made herself clear, this man should be tactful. She didn't expect that when she stepped forward, she was stopped by the man again. This time, Gu Xingyin didn't talk nonsense with him. She reached out, bent her leg, and after a neat grab, she threw him to the ground. Cough cough. Xia Ziqing half knelt on the ground and looked at Gu Xingyin in disbelief. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows and looked at him condescendingly. I've said it before. If you pester me again, don't blame me for being rude. This time no one stopped them. Gu Xingyin left with Zhu Xiaoxiao without looking back. Ziqing. The woman who had been hiding in the back carefully stepped forward, ready to help Xia Ziqing. Get out of my way. Xia Ziqing shook her off with a disgusted expression. Gu Xingyin took Zhu Xiaoxiao home. As Long Tianruo's #1 fangirl, Zhu Xiaoxiao was a resident of Long Tianruo's villa. What they didn't know was that the confrontation between Long Tianruo and Xia Ziqing in the corridor had been witnessed by someone else. This was a very simple room. A huge screen was playing the scene in the corridor. The back of a dark chair was facing the door. Fourth Master, this woman hit young Master Qing. Should we? A brawny man who was nearly 2 meters tall was bent over. His eyes were very unruly, and one could tell that he was a man of his word. However, at this moment his tone was extremely respectful as he asked the person sitting on the chair. Fourth Master, this woman hit young Master Qing. A hand reached out and stopped him from speaking. This was an extremely beautiful hand. The joints were slender and distinct, and the color was like white jade. The outline of the hand was graceful. She wore an emerald ring on her index finger, and the green color made her fingers look even fairer. You're in such a sorry state because of a woman, and you still have the nerve to ask the elders of your family to step in. This person's voice was a little hoarse, but his casual tone was very seductive. It made people want to turn around and see what the person hiding behind the chair looked like. However, it was obvious that the only other person in the room, the brawny man, didn't have the guts. After the man finished speaking, he bowed and quietly left. Long Tianrua? After an unknown amount of time, that deep voice sounded again. You're quite skilled. He only said this one sentence, and the whole room fell silent again. Gu Xingyin didn't know that she had already been noticed by an extraordinary existence. Chapter 354. Gu Xingyin was very busy these days. Every day, she felt more strongly than the day before that it was really not easy to be a president. Long Tianrua had to work overtime almost every day. It was absolutely rare for her to get off work on time like the last time. Fortunately, she had strong professional skills and the invincible existence of the system, so there would not be any mistakes. I'm sorry, you're fired. The personnel manager with a serious face informed Wang Zhenjin. Wang Zhenjin's face turned pale. She was weak by nature, but this time, she summoned up the courage to ask why. The answer she got was cold. You were at the bottom in every assessment. I think an employee like you is not suitable for our company. Wang Zhenjin, who was in a daze, packed her things and went home. Gu Xingyin didn't say much after knowing that Wang Zhenjin had left the company. When she finished her work, she said to the system, "Pay attention to Xia Ziqing's recent movements. Report to me at any time if you encounter any situation." She would never let Wang Zhenjin bear the debt of saving her life. "President, here is a cooperation plan with Xia Group." Julie came in with a thick folder. Gu Xingyin pinched her eyebrows tiredly and opened it. Julie looked at her president's tired face and felt distressed. She couldn't wait to do it herself and give her a massage. She blinked hard and pulled back her thoughts that had flown to the horizon. She asked in a serious tone, "President, who do you plan to send for this negotiation?" Gu Xingyin looked for a while. This was the first time that the two groups had such an important cooperation. It couldn't be taken lightly. "I'll go in person. This time, of course, we have to show Xia Group our sincerity." Julie nodded. "Okay, I'll communicate with Xia Group." After Julie left, Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. She leaned her head on the back of the chair and relaxed. It was not that she wanted to be brave. In every world, since she took on the identity of the protagonist, she had to take on her responsibilities. Now that she was Long Tianrua, she was going to make the Long Corporation even more powerful in her hands. Gu Xingyin picked up the documents and read them carefully. The date he had arranged with the Xia Group was just a few days away. In the eyes of some people in City A, such as Long Tianrua and the people in their circle, the Xia Group was an existence that they couldn't afford to offend. They started with an underground business, and now, following the trend of the times, they were clean on the surface. However, anyone with half a brain knew that the Xia Group was not really a simple business group. Their true horror lay in the invisible places. In the past, there had been some foolish people who wanted to challenge the Xia family. Everyone had seen what happened to them. At least, Long Tianrua had never seen those people in any business meetings again. The Xia Group's headquarters wasn't far from the Long Group's. They were both located in the busiest business circle in a city. Long Tianrua had arrived at the Xia Group's headquarters early. The arrival of the CEO of the Long Corporation also showed the importance they attached to this cooperation. The Xia Corporation also welcomed him with the highest standards. In the conference room, when Long Tianrua sat down, he found that there was no one on the main seat. She raised her eyebrows. What did he mean? She looked at the public relations manager of Xia Group and said lightly, "The person in charge of your company is really busy." Chapter 355. The PR manager of Xia Group could only smile apologetically. He was also puzzled in his heart. They had clearly agreed on the time, and President Xia had also said that he would personally host the meeting. What was going on now? At this moment, the door was pushed open. The PR manager of Xia Group looked towards the door with a look of surprise. Who was this person? Why didn't he recognize him? Gu Xingyin also subconsciously raised her head and looked in that direction. This man, Gu Xingyin, was stunned for a moment. He was really good-looking. He was wearing a well-ironed suit without a single wrinkle. A corner of a neatly folded handkerchief could be seen in the front pocket of his chest. His skin was extremely white, like the finest jade. His facial features were so handsome that they could be described as exquisite. No one would mistake his gender. This man's aura was too strong. Almost the moment he entered, the entire conference room fell silent. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. She stood up gracefully and said to the man, "May I know who this is?" At this moment, she had already begun to call the system in her mind. System, if this person isn't the president of Xia Group, who is he? The system quickly gave an answer. The head of the Xia family, fourth master Xia, Xia Wanjun. Gu Xingyin was shocked. This head of the Xia family, who was known as the fourth master, was like a background character in the original plot. He had almost never appeared. He only existed in legends. Xia Wanjun didn't speak. Gu Xingyin knew the person standing beside him. He was a vice president of Xia Group. The smiling and amiable vice president introduced him to Gu Xingyin. This is one of the big directors of Xia Group, Xia Wanjun, Director Xia. This time, the president has something urgent to attend to, so Director Xia is in charge of the cooperation with Long Group. Gu Xingyin was surprised. She didn't know what this person was planning to do this time. She revealed a faint smile and stretched out her right hand. "Director Xia, nice to meet you." Xia Wanjun also stretched out his hand. The two hands clasped together. Gu Xingyin realized that this person's hand not only looked like it was made of jade, but it was also slightly cold to the touch. The vice president's eyes almost popped out when he saw this scene. Isn't Master for a clean freak? He actually shook hands with someone just like that? Since when did the fourth master become so careless? Xia Wanjun faintly glanced at this idiot, and the vice president immediately returned to his previous amiable appearance. Xia Wanjun felt it for a moment, and came to a conclusion. Gu Xingyin composed herself. No matter what fourth master Xia's motive was, she just had to do what she had to do. Both parties had a pleasant conversation. Although fourth master Xia was a man of few words, he could always hit the nail on the head. His understanding of the project was no less than that of Gu Xingyin. He was also very satisfied with Gu Xingyin. This woman's style of doing things was direct and efficient, without any sloppiness. It was not in vain that he had specially transferred her away. He thought to himself that this woman was right to break up with her useless distant nephew. That kid Xia Ziqing was really not worthy of her. He had called him a kid, forgetting that he was only a few years older than him. Then I hope we have a pleasant cooperation this time. Gu Xingyin stood up and stretched out her right hand again. Pleasant cooperation. Xia Wanjun smiled for the first time today. Gu Xingyin left Xia Group in a good mood. Chapter 356. Of course she was happy. Not only did she have a deal, but she also found her lover. Gu Xingyin felt that she should open a bottle of red wine to celebrate tonight. At this time, the system gave Gu Xingyin an alert. Recording devices have been found in the host's car, the villa's living room, bedroom, garden and office. Gu Xingyin. Didn't this mean that all of her private and public life was exposed to the eyes of others? Find out the owner of these devices immediately. What if it was a rival group that used them to eavesdrop on trade secrets? Gu Xingyin shook her head. She was afraid that it wasn't that simple. If it was just to eavesdrop on trade secrets, there was no need to install cameras in her house. Moreover, the system didn't find any abnormalities before, which meant that these devices had just been installed. Someone with such power. Gu Xingyin already had a faint guess in her heart. Sure enough, the system's hesitant voice sounded. It's Xia Wanjun. Gu Xingyin. Although she had expected it, she still felt a little strange when she heard the news. Could it be that the lovers in this world had a hobby of peeping? Gu Xingyin's heart was in a mess, but the system was already very considerate and continued to tell her. Host, don't worry, Xia Wanjun only installed these cameras in your room. He is only interested in your private life. Gu Xingyin. Damn pervert. Damn Xia Wanjun, the pervert, didn't know that his tricks had been seen through. He had always been very controlling, and it was rare to meet someone that he was interested in. By the time he reacted, he had already issued those orders. This was really Xia Wanjun held his forehead. He had really never done such a tasteless thing. But thinking of that beautiful and aggressive woman, Xia Wanjun couldn't deny that he was looking forward to seeing her in private. Gu Xingyin rolled her eyes and had an idea. You want to know my private life, right? I'll let you taste the bitter fruit that you brewed yourself. But now there was an important matter, which was that Xia Ziqing was being hunted down, and Wang Zhenjin had saved his life. Gu Xingyin worked overtime as usual. Originally, Xia Wanjun was just doing it on a whim. After all, he had a lot of things to do. He didn't want to see what a woman was doing every day all the time. However, he didn't know when it started, but he gradually developed a habit. Every night, he would stay in his room alone to see what Long Tianrua was doing. The more he saw, the more he understood her. For example, this woman was really hard-working. He watched her work overtime every day. She was clearly the CEO. To outsiders, she was incomparably glorious, but her life was more tiring than most of the employees. However, for a woman like her, even if someone was willing to hold up the sky for her, she probably wouldn't be willing to hide under someone else's wings, right? It was originally an eagle that soared in the sky, so how could it be willing to be a bird that was carefully raised by someone? He watched as Gu Xingyin rubbed her temples, turned off the computer, packed her things, and left the office. The screen suddenly became empty. This time, Gu Xingyin did not drive home directly. Instead, she went to a nearby shopping mall. Wang Zhenjin met the injured Xia Ziqing at the parking lot of this shopping mall. Not to mention why Wang Zhenjin, who didn't have a car, would go to the parking lot at night. Gu Xingyin got her wish to see the unconscious Xia Ziqing lying on the ground. Chapter 357. She stepped forward and took a look at the unconscious Xia Ziqing. After making sure that he was indeed unconscious, she leaned over and lifted him up. That's right, this tall but slender girl had lifted a man who was more than 1.8 meters tall. She didn't take him to the car. The Xia family's power was spread all over City A. Xia Ziqing just stopped in such a remote place because he was too weak. Gu Xingyin looked around and took Xia Ziqing to a bench at the entrance of the underground shopping mall for people to rest. She was sure that if she left him there, the Xia family's people would come and take him away in less than 5 minutes. After doing this, Gu Xingyin clapped her hands and turned away without hesitation. She didn't see that the man behind her, who was supposed to be unconscious, suddenly opened his eyes with great effort. He glanced in her direction and then fell asleep again. Gu Xingyin didn't go directly to the garage. Instead, she went to the mall and took out a bag of things. She believed that with the Xia family's power, it would be easy for Xia Wanjun to find out who put Xia Ziqing there. So if Gu Xingyin didn't buy anything and left directly after saving someone, it would be hard to explain. In this way, it was easy to understand. Long Tianrua was going to the mall to buy something, but she met the injured Xia Ziqing on the way. Out of morality, she took him to a place where the Xia family could see him. Everything was perfect. That was her excuse. As for whether they believed it or not, it was their business. Gu Xingyin drove all the way home. This wasn't the old house of the Long family. Several elders of the Long family lived in the old house. Long Tianrua didn't want to listen to their nagging all day, so she simply bought a villa and lived here. She only went back once a month to have dinner with those people. She didn't like strangers coming in and out of her place. So in such a big villa, there were almost no footprints of others except for the hourly cleaners who came to clean regularly every week in Zhu Xiaoxiao, who liked to stick to her the most. This was also the reason why Xia Wanjuan's men could do it so easily. After opening the door, the first thing Gu Xingyin did was to take off his suit. She always dressed formally for work, wearing a meticulous white shirt under her suit. However, At this moment, the top two buttons of her shirt, which had been buttoned up to the top during the day, were unbuttoned, revealing her delicate collarbone and the sparkling skin below. A little further down, an undulating cleavage was hidden under the tight shirt. Someone once said that shirts weren't suitable for people with hot bodies. Indeed, Gu Xingyin's clothes, which were originally the most serious, had a hint of abstinence. Not to mention, at this moment, the beauty's long hair was down to her waist. She opened a bottle of red wine and sat on the sofa lazily tasting it. Xiao Wanjun habitually turned on the screen and saw such a scene. Long Tianruo's appearance was undeniably beautiful, but in the daytime, she was too sharp. The first thing people felt was her powerful aura, and very few people would pay attention to her face. At this moment, she had faded away her sharpness during the day. Her sharp eyebrows relaxed, and under the light, there was a hint of coquettish beauty. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.